All right, so we've talked about the concept of creating a variable, different types of variables, variable substitution. Let's talk about what is known as an operator. Okay. What an operator in programming allows you to do is basically do basic math functions like adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. So what I'm going to do, let's open up P5.js. Let's open up my file from, all right. So what I'm going to do, all right, I'm back. So let's do a little bit of this of operators. So for instance, if you want to add in JavaScript, we can basically use the plus sign. Okay, I'm going to go back. This is exercise 2. I'm going to go to setup, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off this other stuff for now. I'm just going to comment it out. And I'm going to use the print function, which should give us the result of something. And if I use the operator plus sign, I am saying, give me the, print out the result of 1 plus 1. And so the result should be 2. Okay. I could use variable substitution. So currently, if I were to say this, circle diameter plus 1, well, if we know that circle diameter is equal to 50, that can substitute into here. 50 plus 1 would be 51. Let's hit plus sign, and there you go. Okay. So we can do addition. We can also do the operator of subtraction. Okay, what does that mean? Well, I can take a number and subtract it. If I were to say 10 minus 1, okay, this is my subtraction operator. The answer would be 9. If once again I wanted to do variable substitution, let's do circle diameter minus, I don't know, 5. Okay. Once again, this should substitute into there. 50 minus 5 would be 45. Right? There you go. We can do, let's say you want to do let's say you want to multiply, we can use the star. Okay, so if I were to say 2 star 5, that basically means 2 times 5. So 2 times 5 is 10. Once again, I want to use variable substitution. So here, this would substitute 50. 50 times 5 would be 250. Okay. We can also do division. That's a forward slash. So if I come into here, 10 forward slash 5, 10 divided by 5 should be 2. I could also do circle diameter divided by 5. Okay, 50 divided by 5 is 10. Finally, we have, I forget what you call this in JavaScript. I just forget the name of it, but it's the modulus. That's it. What the modulus will do is it actually will give you the remainder of something from a division. So what does that mean? Well, let's say that we have 5 divided by 2. Okay. So if we're keeping things as whole numbers, 5 divided by 2 would be 2 with 1 remaining, right? There's that one extra that doesn't divide evenly. And so that will, oops, sorry, not, that's division. I want the modulus. So this will divide this by this number, but if there's any left over that can't be divided into whole numbers, the modulus will give you that back. So I should get, this is essentially 5 divided by 2 with remainder 1, and the remainder is what's going to be given here. And it is, okay. And if I did something like, I don't know, circle diameter, modulus, I don't know, 7. So that's going to be 50 to modulus 7. So I think that should also be 1 because 7 times 7 is 49. Should be 1 left over. Okay. But maybe if I did 6. There you go. 2 because it'd be 11 times 66. 11 times 6 is 66. Or sorry, 6 times 8 would be 40. 8 times 9, 46. Yeah, so, or 48, should be 2 left over. Okay. This is actually how we can tell whether a number is even or odd. Is if you ever get asked this in a programming, it's like, well, if something is modulus 2 and you get 0, that means it's an even number. And if something is a modulus 1, it'll always give remainder 1. So if you ever have to determine whether a number is even or odd for some reason, this would be an easy way to do that. Okay. We can also use operators to affect other things. So for instance, I'm going to make a new variable called I don't know. Let's just say for the sake of argument, I want the diameter to be, let's just say I want the border of the circle to be half that of the diameter. So I'm going to say circle border, or circle stroke, I should say, equals circle diameter divided by 2. Okay. So what I'm saying here is this value is entirely based on this because we're doing variable substitution. That would substitute 50 into there. 50 divided by 2 is 25. So if I turn this back on, this is my circle. Now I want to affect the circle circles, the stroke, the weight of it. That would be stroke weight. I'm going to use the variable circle stroke. There you go. Okay. If the circle becomes smaller, so should. Oops. Circle diameter. Oh, whoops, because I'm changing it down. There we go. There. All right. Let's say for some reason we wanted to take the value of something and add 1 to it, except we didn't know what the value of it currently was. Let's just say for the sake of argument, I want to take the value of the circle diameter, I want to add 1 to it, but let's just pretend I don't know what the current value is. If we want to increase something, we could say something like this. I could say circle diameter equals circle diameter plus 1. Okay. So this wouldn't really work in normal math. You can't have something equal to itself plus 1. But in mathematics, what we're doing is this isn't saying that this is equal. What we're doing is we're assigning a value. And we're saying the value of this is whatever it currently is plus 1. So if the value is currently 25, and I'm just going to print the value of it. The value, when I print this out, it should be 26. And it is. Okay. You want to make it some other number besides 1, like say 5. That's adding it to that. Okay. This also works for adding and subtracting. I could say the circle diameter equals the circle diameter minus 5. So in other words, take whatever the value is and subtract 5 from it. So if it starts at 25, then I'm going to get 20. Okay. Or I could take that value and multiply it by 2. So take whatever the current value is and times it by 2. So I should have 50. Okay. Or times that by 3. So now I should have 75. Okay. Another thing I wanted to kind of point out is that we can make variables. So I can come up with a variable of any name that I want. I can come into here and I can make a variable called my color, or I don't know, Mr. Hurwitch color, or whatever it is I want to call the variable. I can call it any name I want. It's up to me. But some of the variables are actually, they're what we call reserved name. And what that essentially means is if I say something is or if someone says something is a reserved name, what that means is that there is already code associated or with that name or variable. So in other words, like reserved function, you can make your own function, but there's already a function called create canvas. There's already a function called circle. Okay. P5JS actually already comes with some pre-made variables that we can actually get the values of. Okay. If you want to look at them, some of them are window width, window height, width, height, mouse X, mouse Y. What window width will give you is if you call this function or this variable, it will give you the total width of your browser. So if I come into here and I say print window width, notice here it makes it magenta. That's how the online one shows you that something is a reserved variable name. If I click that, it will give me the value, which is 650. That's what this is. So what it's saying is this part here is 650. If I make it bigger, you can see how that number changes. If I make this smaller, you can see how that number changes. Okay. There's window height. Once again, that's a built-in variable that gives the value of whatever this height is of the browser. If I click play, 495 is the height. If I make the height smaller, like that, you can see it becomes smaller. If I make it taller, you can see that the value increases. Okay. So that's like the browser itself. Width would actually give you the width of your canvas. This is your canvas. So if you wanted to know what the width of your canvas was, or just get it really quickly, you could use that variable. Mouse X and mouse Y is actually pretty useful. What it will do is it'll give you the value of mouse X is the horizontal value of your mouse, your cursor, and the mouse Y is the vertical placement of it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into print and I'm going to say mouse X. And see how it says 0? And then when I go onto the canvas, the more I go to the right, you can see that the X value is increasing over in my console. If I go to the left, see how it's lowering? Okay. This is in my draw function, which we're going to talk about, but the draw function is constantly updating. That's why it keeps changing. It's able to change this value. If you had it in setup, this wouldn't work because it would only give you the value of your mouse when the when the game or when the project starts, as opposed to constantly updating it. Okay. Mouse Y would do the same thing, but it would give me the Y value as opposed to the X value. So it starts off at 0 because remember Y starts at 0 up here. And then as I go down, I'm getting a higher Y value. And then I get all the way to here, and this should be 400. Okay. So you can use these to your advantage. Here, what I'm saying is if I want to make a canvas that's exactly the size of my browser, if I said window width, window height, what that means is it would make a canvas that is always the size of your browser, no matter what size your browser is. So when I do that, you can see it's a browser of that size. I stop and I go back. Same thing. Okay. You might be wondering, how do we know, the various how do we know what the variables are that are built into P5? The way I would recommend doing that is go to the P5JS website and go under reference, and we have constants. They look like adjusted variables. Basically, if you see something and it doesn't have brackets next to the name of it, that means it's a variable and not a function. Okay, so if I keep scrolling, I'm just looking for some stuff here. So see where it says vertices, although that's an array, and I don't really want to talk about an array right now. It's a little more complicated, but I don't know. So for instance, frame count. This will tell you how many frames have been happening since the beginning of the program. Usually your program runs about 60 to 50, 30, 50, 40 to 60 frames a second. So if I were to type that in here, frame count, that's a reserved variable, and it would just keep counting how many frames have gone on since the beginning of the program. Okay. Once again, if you just want to check what it does, click on it. It's a number variable that tracks the number of frames since it started. I don't know if you can look just by anything, like I said, where it doesn't have a curly bracket should mean that it's a variable and not a function. So like pixels, although this is a little more complicated because that's an array. So like height, we talked about that. Width, that has to do with the size of your canvas. We just talked about frame count, window width, so those are reserved variables. There's also reserved functions, which we'll get into later. We don't have a camera, but if we did, we could tell where it's the what X and Y value were. Those are variables. Color, which has to do with if you have a 3D object. I know this makes for some great video. Watching me scroll through a reference. I'm sure that's exactly what you wanted to see. This is the X and Y value component. This has to do with a vector. We're not going to build vectors, but you could get the X and Y value for that. All right. Anyway, I'm wasting enough of your time, but that's what it is. So there are some built-in. This is acceleration. This would be cool. It's not going to work on a browser on a computer like a desktop, but if you were running this on your phone, this is an accelerometer. So your every device like a cell phone or a tablet has an accelerometer. And what that means is it can figure out how fast you're moving it. And so this would actually give you that value in the X direction, the Y direction, or the Z. So for that to work, you'd have to run you'd have to run the P5 project on a cell phone or a tablet or any sort of device that has a accelerometer built into it. My tablet, or my desktop computer doesn't have that, so it's not going to work. But if you did have that, there's some cool stuff you could actually do here. You can tell what orientation the device is at. So these are all some built-in, variables you could kind of take advantage of. You can tell what key you just pressed if you wanted to know the key code. So it gives you a key. So for instance, if I were to, unfortunately, it has to pick up that I'm typing. Key. And then I press, there you go. See, it's giving me the letters back. So anyway, just some interesting things you can play around with.